Charles Dickens is arguably not only the most important novelist of English literature, but perhaps, with the exception of Shakespeare, the most widely read novelist, and in fact one of the greatest writers of the world, which has been acknowledged by people beyond England. However, within England, the history of reception of Dickens, especially critical reception of Dickens, has been a little problematic. It has been a little uneven, rather. The main point is F.R. Lewis, who is again by common consent known to be the trendsetter, or rather the setter of the traditions of the English departments in so many parts of the globe through his works like The Great Tradition, had more or less dismissed Dickens as a great writer. In fact, he acknowledged that Dickens has a great talent and possibly is one of the classics or classical writer, quote unquote, classical in the sense of being important. But then Dickens's talent, according to Lewis, is that of an entertainer. Now it is very difficult from our perspective, a postmodern perspective, to maintain this distinction between an entertainer and a writer proper. I can give other similar examples. For example, is pornography literature, or is it something different? You know, it's very difficult to draw distinctions when we think of works like Lady Chatterley's Lover or Lolita, for instance. They are as perverse. I mean, I'm not using the word in a judgmental sense, but reflecting other people's judgmental view, maybe. So these novels that I have named are as salacious, rather say, as any pornography, but at the same time they have something beyond that. Similarly, I do not think it was proper on the part of F.R. Lewis to dismiss Dickens as an entertainer. Now, why he did so is a different question, but most possibly it is due to the fact that Dickens was not associated to a very elite background, either in his own life or in the characters. Majority of the characters that you see in Dickens, like Pip, for example, Oliver Twist, or even David Copperfield, are orphans without any much credible ancestry, and so on and so forth. Now, it is quite well known that Lewis was more or less an elitist, or through and through an elitist, rather, it's better to put it like that. So, Lewis, in his arguably the most important or influential book, The Great Tradition, puts it like this regarding Dickens, I quote, that Dickens was a great genius and is permanently among the classics is certain, but the genius was that of a great entertainer, and he had, for the most part, no profounder responsibility as a creative artist than this description suggests. That means Dickens had no social responsibility, nothing of that sort, but only wanted to entertain. But even a student of class 8 or 9 who has read Dickens will disagree with Lewis. So it is quite counterfactual what Lewis was saying. Dickens had serious investments in socio-political, socio-economic development of the downtrodden, for example, so on and so forth. Now, contra Lewis, Dickens was established as a great writer, or a very centrally important writer, by Lewis's own student who quarreled with him frequently, Raymond Williams. In Raymond Williams' counter text to Lewis's The Great Tradition, which is the English novel from Dickens to Lawrence, I mean, he just picks up the ones that Lewis leaves out in his Great Tradition. So there he says that, implies that Lewis's reading of Dickens was partial basically, and what finally matters, according to Williams, is the total vision that is emerging out of all Dickens's work. And any kind of reading of Dickens based on bits and parts of his works would be faulty. He was indirectly implying that Lewis's readings of Dickens was, not complete. So I quote here from the text of Williams: "It would not be difficult picking up all these bits and pieces and seeing how often they're contradictory to call Dickens merely irresponsible. Indeed, it has been done. But the responsibility finally is to the general vision, and in the end, that is deep and remarkable." Unquote. So, if you have listened to it carefully, that it is difficult to call Dickens merely responsible. Indeed, it has been done. Done by whom? By Lewis, in the previous quote that I quoted. So, but he says that finally such a vision will not persist if we read everything of Dickens. That is, there are passages in Dickens which are full of humor actually. And what Williams implies is that Lewis focused only on those things, humorous parts, humorous situations, while judging Dickens as an entertainer. While doing that, he missed out on the totality. So, Mr. Micawber, for example, funny character in David Copperfield, or Uriah Heep, for example. And as we say, traditionally, the balanced approach is in Dickens there is an adroit blend of pathos and humor. There is humor, no doubt, but it is continuously balanced against pathetic situations, life stories, sufferings, etc. So, even perhaps more than in Shakespeare's tragicomedies, which are known to have a similar status, mixtures of tragedy and comedy. Now, while Williams is found to be appropriate in his reading of Dickens's great and total vision, Edward Said, in his Culture and Imperialism, finds a problem with Williams himself. That problem is, Said maintains, that William underreads or does not read enough the colonial investments of the novels of Charles Dickens. The novel that he chooses to elaborate on is Great Expectations. As we all know, Great Expectations is the story of a child, Philip Pip or Pip, who gets some position in life, gets to become someone or becomes someone from very humble origins. He also is basically a fatherless child, even as Charles Dickens's David Copperfield is. But then finally he can become a gentleman, but then he is becoming gentleman. The process of his becoming a gentleman is maintained by the fund given by an unknown benefactor, about whom he comes to know only at the end. This benefactor is a criminal, Abel Magwitch, whom Pip had helped during his childhood, helped him to escape actually. I'm not telling the story here, but the critical points. So you please find out, those of you who haven't read. This is a must-read text, I think, whether it is in the syllabus or not. So anyway, so whom he had helped as a child. So this Abel Magwitch, he was finally caught. He could not escape, though Pip had somehow helped him to escape, and then he was transported to the penal colony of Australia. In those days, Australia, our Sri Lanka, Ceylon, Andaman, these were all penal colonies. That is, criminals of the British Empire were transported to those parts. And there in that empire, Abel Magwitch made a lot of fortune by farming, business in livestock, etc., etc. With that money, he used to send from that money certain amount for this Pip, because Pip had helped him in his childhood. He remembered that. But the point is that the growth of Pip as a gentleman is based on money coming from colony, that is Australia. But Australia does not figure in the novel at all. So Dickens does not give any place or space to the rather Dickens does not give any space to the place which had helped him or his novel's hero rather become a gentleman. So in the same manner, by extending this analogy, it can be said that the metropolis hardly ever recognizes the contribution of the colonies to their growth, their structures of growth and development. An issue which was recently, not very recently, a few years back, again brought up by Shashi Tharoor in his The Era of Darkness. Right now, British Empire in India, he called it an era of darkness. So, while Raymond Williams somehow wants Dickens to be a great writer, to be recognized as a great writer, this project of making Dickens great is seriously punctuated by two figures, one before one before Raymond Williams, that is F.R. Leavis, and one coming after Williams, that is Edward Said. So, I think we need to have more serious engagements with both Dickens and the critics of Dickens for further exploration of things. Thank you.